Star Wars The Clone Wars is some of the best Star Wars media of all time, and indeed, some of the best television of all time. For many of us, it will be remembered with distinct fondness, and it damn well deserves to be. There were many things The Clone Wars did incredibly well, and while it wasn't perfect, the good outweighs the bad 100-fold. In a video we put out just after the show's conclusion, we talked about what made the show unique, specifically with how its treatment of clone characters earned it a special place in the Star Wars expanded universe. This video will be sort of a follow-up. Today, we'll be discussing all the other aspects of the Clone Wars that made it an amazing show.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Before we begin, we do recommend that you watch our video on what made Star Wars The Clone Wars so unique, because it covers a number of things that we won't be repeating in full here. In that video, we discussed how the show's focus on clone characters sets it apart and how the show put the movies into context. We'll be looking at similar aspects of the show today, in particular, how it built up the Star Wars galaxy, how it gave proper severity to the war, and the lessons it taught us all. Star Wars The Clone Wars was an anthology series, which means it's a collection of small stories based around a central premise. Instead of being one long story, like most shows these days, it had a lot of mostly disconnected arcs, and instead of having a serialized set of stories based around a constant cast, like most Star Trek shows, it switched between several casts of characters. There was no overarching story to the show, and there wasn't really a main character either. While characters like Anakin, Rex, and Ahsoka appear a lot, all of the show's major characters have a whole bunch of episodes in which they aren't even mentioned. This is something that isn't seen much and is quite hard to do properly, and in fact, it's a large part of what makes the show so special. Star Wars The Clone Wars was about the Clone Wars, nothing more and nothing less. Individual arcs had more complex stories and themes, sure, but the war is the only thing that's constant across the entire show. That was the point, of course. The purpose of the show was to paint a clearer picture of the war. The anthology format allows it to do so to the fullest extent by tying it neither to a singular plot thread nor to a singular cast of characters. Stories in the show ranged from the tales of grand battles to complex dives into politics, and sometimes stories with such radically different plots aired right after the other. Character casts were inconsistent, with the main character of one arc playing a minor role or not even appearing in another, which, for the record, is realistic, as there's no such thing as a main character in real life. In both cases, the anthology format allowed the writers to explore the world of the Clone Wars far more than they would have been able to otherwise. As we've mentioned before, world building is perhaps the biggest part of what makes Star Wars great, and the Clone Wars dived right into it. Episodes of the show frequently visited new planets, explored old ones in greater detail, elaborated on cultural nuances the films didn't really have time for, and showcased the ramifications of larger events on smaller parts of the galaxy. The Clone Wars is a mosaic intended to convey as much as possible about the impact of a galactic scale war, and in doing so, it tells us so much about the Star Wars galaxy. It adds depth to the universe, depth that makes it feel real and makes it special. The Clone Wars, as we all know, was also a dark show, and this also was part of what made it so special. It was never gratuitously violent or overly dark, but it did lend the proper severity to war. Being overly violent or dark can hurt a story, as most of you probably know, but the opposite is true as well. Being too light with a story that should be much more serious can also hurt a story. This is a trap that Star Wars Rebels often stumbled into. It constantly shied away from hitting the nail on the head when it came to violence and properly dark storytelling, and that hurt the show, though it didn't come close to killing it or anything like that. The Clone Wars, on the other hand, never shied away from the graphic details of warfare. The bombing of civilian villages, the loss of comrades, horrible ways to die, and even some of the psychological effects of combat were depicted bluntly and openly, which gave them the impact that such things should have. The show offered a glimpse into what war was really like, and it readily admitted that it was far from pleasant. It wasn't disrespectful in doing this either. The show never glorified the horrors it depicted, and it didn't shy away from questioning the morality of conflict in general either. In addition, the show touched on a lot of dark topics, which only added to the aforementioned effect. Over the course of its run, The Clone Wars depicted kidnapping, the targeting of hospitals, colonialism, corpse desecration, biological warfare, the use of civilians as meat shields, attacks on civilian targets, terrorism, trade embargoes, torture, suicide missions, chattel slavery, human experimentation, and the most horrifying of all, D-Squad. For the most part, these are all parts of warfare, and the show not only displayed that, but it also did so respectfully and in a way that can be understood by and is appropriate for younger audiences as well. In doing so, the Clone Wars taught plenty of lessons about the horrors of war. War is often glorified in media, sometimes even unintentionally, and the Clone Wars seized on its opportunity to go against that grain. There's nothing glorious about war, and there never has been, and Star Wars The Clone Wars really hammered this point in. Wars are often depicted as grand strategic contests, but in reality, they're just chaotic bloodbaths. Wars are often claimed to be fought for the sake of saving people, but in reality, most of the time they just cause pain for civilians. Wars are often cast as opportunities for personal glory, but in reality, they're opportunities to watch your friends die beside you. These were all points the Clone Wars made in its time, and they're very good lessons for a show to teach. There are no faceless soldiers in Star Wars The Clone Wars. As we discussed in our earlier video, the show goes to great lengths to establish the clones as unique individuals with their own distinct personalities, beliefs, and hopes. Even the show's battle droids are given an uncanny degree of humanity, to the point where viewers might start to question whether or not they, too, have their own hopes and dreams. There is weight to every casualty, just like there is in reality. Perhaps one of the biggest themes in the show was that it's not cowardly or traitorous to question the way things are. Within the Star Wars universe, the Clone Wars did not have to happen, and the show makes this perfectly clear. It establishes that questioning the morality of the conflict was not only acceptable, but in this case was the right thing to do. Considering whether society is going down a bad path, questioning the morality and necessity of wars and defying authority are often depicted in a far too negative light in media, but the Clone Wars made clear that not only can such things be morally right, but that in some cases, they're the only options that are morally right. I mean, consider that final episode. The whole conflict of the series finale was based around the morality of obedience. In the episode, the heroic course of action, which Rex and no other clone takes, is to reject authority of the Empire and disobey Order 66. This is a really strong message, especially when you consider that it's about totally disregarding a legitimate order from a perfectly legitimate authority. Unlike so many similar stories, it's not about choosing a legitimate but disadvantaged authority over an illegitimate but powerful one, choosing the rightful king, so to speak. It's about rejecting the legitimate authority altogether because it's the right thing to do in the circumstances presented. That's not common in media, especially in media that's open to younger audiences. Those kinds of shows often have a really bad habit of marketing blind obedience, and the Clone Wars did a truly great thing by flying in the face of that. But despite all of its dark storytelling, despite the gravity of the lessons it taught, the Clone Wars was rarely depressing. It was still fun and enjoyable despite all the heavy topics. It never failed to give us a light in the darkness, to provide some levity and humanity to the danger and foreboding of the Clone Wars. It isn't common for dark concepts to be depicted with the proper gravity and respect, and it's even less common for a show to be able to depict that darkness without being consumed by it, without becoming depressing. Like Battlestar Galactica, which the Clone Wars' writers were in many ways inspired by, the show walked that fine line, and for that, we'll honor it forever. So those are some of the many reasons why we'll always cherish Star Wars The Clone Wars. But what do you think? What made The Clone Wars special for you? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, please do check out those links in the description below, including our main Geetsly's Discord where you can interact with other Star Wars fans such as yourself and also myself. And if you just want to game with other Star Wars fans, then our Gary's Mod servers are the places for you. All those links are in the description box below. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.